Imagine a time when the fate of Middle-earth hung in the balance, yet one of its greatest protectors was shrouded in mystery. For 17 long years, Gandalf the Grey vanished from the pages of history, leaving both allies and enemies wondering about his whereabouts. What secrets did he uncover during his absence? Was he forging alliances in distant lands, battling dark forces, or perhaps seeking ancient wisdom hidden in the shadows? In this video, we'll delve deep into the untold stories of the Grey Pilgrim, exploring the pivotal moments that shaped his character and the very destiny of our beloved realm. Join us as we unravel the enigmatic journey of Gandalf, revealing the trials he faced and the lessons he learned. Prepare to embark on an adventure filled with lore, mystery, and the magic that defines Middle-earth. Let's uncover what really happened in those missing years. Before we continue further, if you could take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel, it would mean the world and help us share more tales of Arda. Now, let's return to the story. Rumor became his only trace. Some said a gray wanderer had been seen upon the edges of the east, near the Sea of Rune, walking where even the stars seemed strange. Others swore they glimpsed him beneath the shadows of the White Mountains, speaking softly with the shepherds of forgotten lands. But to most, he was gone, as if the wind itself had carried him into legend. In Rivendell, Elrond looked to the empty seat beside his own and frowned. In Lothlorien, Galadriel stood upon her balcony and gazed into the mirror's still water, but the image of the Grey Pilgrim showed only mist. And in the dark lands of the south, where clouds gathered like the wings of vultures, something unseen began to stir. For 17 long years, Gandalf the Grey walked beyond the light of friendly eyes, through ruin and wilderness, through the memory of fire and the birth of fear. His journey would be written not in ink or lore, but in the ashes of a world that had forgotten what was coming. In those years, kings would die, shadows would rise, and hope would flicker, like a candle in the wind. And all the while, the Grey Pilgrim, unseen, unthanked, bore the weight of truth upon his heart. It began in the quiet heart of the Shire. Gandalf had come to visit an old friend, Bilbo Baggins, the curious hobbit who had once stolen from dragons and dined with dwarves. Yet as they sat before the fire, and laughter flickered in Bilbo's eyes, the wizard's heart was troubled. Bilbo had not changed, or rather, he had changed too little. Years had passed, yet time seemed to flow around him like a stream around a stone. His hair silvered, his steps slowed, but the light in his eyes was untouched, unnaturally bright, like a spark that would not fade. And when he spoke of his treasure, that small ring of gold he kept so close, his voice took on a hunger Gandalf did not like. "It is precious to him," he murmured to himself that night beneath the stars, "and perilous." The ring gleamed faintly in the firelight, and for the first time in long ages, Gandalf felt the faintest echo of a voice, ancient, seductive, patient. So small, so harmless. Yet deep within the wizard's heart, a dread stirred, one older than fear itself. He departed in haste, leaving only a promise to return. His horse carried him through leagues of rain and dust until he reached the white walls of Minas Tirith. There, in the quiet vaults of the stewards, he sought the truth in ink and parchment, among scrolls that smelled of age and sorrow. By candlelight, he read the words of Isildur, words that burned upon the page like fire. One ring to rule them all, one ring to find them, one ring to bring them all, and in the darkness bind them. The quill fell from his hand. The room seemed to darken, and he heard again the faint, cruel laughter of a voice that had once ruled the world. It could not be, and yet it was. He stood upon the battlements as the first light touched the white city. Below him, the Anduin glimmered like a river of ghosts, and he knew, with the cold certainty of prophecy, that the age of peace was a lie. The ring of power, the One, had survived. And somewhere in the green hills of the Shire, it waited to be found again. The road eastward was long and cruel. Winter lingered in the mountain passes, and the wind from the misty mountains carried a sharpness that cut through cloak and bone alike. Gandalf rode beneath pale skies, his thoughts heavy as the clouds above him. The truth was no longer a whisper, it was a burden, and it pressed upon him with every step. If the ring in Bilbo's keeping was indeed the One, then the enemy would not rest. Somewhere in the dark, a will older than time was stirring, seeking, listening. He could feel it. And so began the longest hunt of his life, not for a king, nor for a weapon, but for a creature who had once been both hobbit and horror: Gollum. Once known as Smeagol, he had borne the ring for centuries, feeding on its poison, twisting beneath its whispers until he was no longer one thing nor another. And Gandalf knew that within that wretched soul lay the truth of all the world's peril. For months he sought the creature's trail, among the reeds of the Gladden fields, through the dark paths of Mirkwood, and down the silent banks of the Anduin. He spoke with woodmen who had seen pale eyes gleaming by moonlight. He bribed traders in the east who muttered of a voice that hissed in the night. He questioned beasts and birds, for even the animals had felt the chill of something crawling in the dark. Still, he found nothing. Until one night, beneath a red sky, he met a familiar shadow by a dying campfire, tall, cloaked, grim as the northern wind. "Gandalf," said the man, his voice low, steady. "You seek him too." "Aragorn," replied the wizard, a spark of relief in his eyes. "Then you have heard?" The ranger nodded. "Whispers of a thing that hunts without rest. It follows the scent of the ring." For a time, silence passed between them, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Then Gandalf spoke. "If he finds it before we do, the game is lost. The Dark Lord will have his servant, and through him, his path to the Shire." Aragorn's gaze hardened. "Then let us hunt him together." And so they did. Through the shadowed vales of Anduin, across the marshes where the air reeked of decay, they rode and walked and crept, following faint tracks and fouler smells. The nights were long, filled with the sound of water dripping from unseen caverns, the whisper of reeds, and the rasping breath of a world that seemed to watch them. Once, in the fog of the dead marshes, Aragorn nearly fell into a pool whose surface gleamed with ghostly light. Beneath the water, pale faces stared back, remnants of a war long past. Gandalf drew him away. "Do not heed the dead," he said softly. "Their war is over, ours is not." Weeks turned to months. The land grew harsher. Storms tore across the sky, lightning carving silver wounds into the clouds. And then, at last, beneath the slopes of the Ash Mountains, they found him. A shriveled thing crouched among the rocks, pale as bone, eyes wide and gleaming in the dark. He hissed when the light struck him, and when Aragorn's hands closed upon him, he screamed, not in pain, but in loss. "Precious!" he shrieked. "Thief! Thief! We wants it back!" Gandalf knelt beside him. The stench was unbearable, the madness worse. Yet within that ruin of a creature, the wizard saw the shadow of pity. "Sméagol," he said gently, "tell me what you know." Long they wrestled with words and fear, and from that broken mouth the truth came forth. 2 words that turned the wizard's heart to stone. Shire Baggins. Gandalf rose slowly, his face pale in the dawn. "He knows," he whispered. "Sauron knows." Behind them, the wind rose, carrying the sound of distant thunder, the first voice of war. Darkness lay upon Mirkwood like a sickness. The trees leaned close as if listening, their roots tangled with the bones of old battles. Once, the forest had been fair, green, alive, full of song. Now, the air itself seemed to choke. At its heart stood a fortress of black stone and sorcery, Dol Guldur. There, the necromancer had dwelt in the days before the White Council drove him forth. But whispers had come again, of new fires in the deep, of spirits gathering in the old pits. And Gandalf, against all counsel, rode alone to see with his own eyes. The gates loomed like teeth, the ground smoked. He wrapped himself in light, his staff a beacon in the gloom, and stepped within. Every sound was a wound. The walls pulsed faintly, as if alive. Shadows crawled upon the floor, moving against the torchlight. And somewhere far below, something laughed. He descended through broken halls, past cages of rusted iron, until he came to the great chamber. Empty, save for a single flame that burned without fuel. He raised his staff, and the darkness recoiled, revealing shapes upon the walls, ancient marks of a hand he had hoped never to see again. Then he heard it, a voice like the grinding of earth upon stone. "So, the Grey Fool returns." The fire flared, and the form of a shadow rose before him, tall, crowned with malice, eyes like coals. "Sauron," Gandalf breathed. The name alone seemed to darken the air. "You have lingered too long in comfort," said the voice. "The world is mine again." Lightning split the roof. Gandalf lifted his staff, light pouring from it like a river, clashing against the shadow's form. The very air trembled. Flame met flame, and for a moment, all of Mirkwood seemed to scream. Then the light broke, and Gandalf was flung from the hall, his cloak aflame, his breath torn from him. He staggered into the open night as the fortress behind him roared with power. He fell to his knees, rain hissing on the ground. "He is not gone," he whispered. "He is waiting." The storm carried his words away, down the valley, across the sleeping world that did not yet know it had awakened to war. When Gandalf returned to the White Council, his hair was singed, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights, yet his voice was steady as stone. "Sauron has returned," he said. "He gathers his servants in Dol Guldur. If we do not act, all will fall." Around the table sat the wise, Galadriel, whose gaze pierced thought itself, Elrond, grave and sorrowful, and Saruman the White, greatest among the Istari. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Saruman smiled, slow, cold. "My dear Mithrandir," he said softly, "you see enemies where there are none. The ring was lost long ago, beyond reach or recall. Even if Sauron stirs, what can he do without it?" "The ring survives," Gandalf answered, "and he will find it." Saruman's smile did not falter, but his eyes flickered, just once. "Then let him search," he said. "You chase phantoms while the world grows weary of war. The council will not move." Galadriel's voice, clear as silver, broke the silence. "If Mithrandir speaks true, we delay at our peril." But Saruman's will was iron, and Elrond's counsel was caution. At last the matter was set aside, like a storm seen upon the horizon, but deemed too distant to fear. When the meeting ended, Gandalf stood alone in the great hall. Galadriel approached him quietly. "You will go without their leave," she said. He nodded. "I must." "Then may the light of the West go with you," she whispered. He bowed his head, weary beyond words. "I do not need the light of the West," he murmured. "I need only enough to see one more road ahead." He left the hall and did not look back. Behind him, Saruman watched from the shadows, his eyes gleaming with a hunger not yet named. Years passed, and Middle-earth forgot his name. The great wars of the past had fallen into story. Men rebuilt their towns and sang of peace. In the north, children grew who had never seen a shadow greater than the setting sun. But Gandalf the Grey did not rest. He walked roads unseen, the quiet watchman of a world that slumbered on the edge of doom. Through the plains of Rohan he rode, his cloak whipping in the wind, speaking softly with riders and kings. He wandered west to the Blue Mountains, where dwarves toiled beneath the earth, and even there his counsel found willing ears. He lingered in Bree, listening to gossip beside a warm fire, and in that simple chatter of innkeepers and travelers, he heard echoes of darker tidings. Rumors of orcs stirring again in the hills, of strange men moving through the wild under banners of black. Yet no one knew who he was. To most, he was a wandering conjurer with a kind word and sharp eyes. To the few who looked deeper, he was something far older. In the solitude of his journey, he thought often of the Shire. Sometimes he would come to its borders, unseen, and watch the lanterns twinkling in Hobbiton like fallen stars. He would see Bilbo in his garden, humming softly as he trimmed the grass, the ring still hanging innocently in his pocket. The sight both comforted and tormented him. "Even the smallest candle defies the dark," he murmured to himself one night as he watched fireflies dance above the fields. Yet how fragile a flame can be when storms draw near. He turned from the west and wandered again into the east, seeking knowledge, allies, and wisdom enough to face what was coming. He spoke with Beorn in the north and the stewards of Gondor in the south. He passed through ruins where only ghosts remembered the songs of the First Age. Everywhere he went, he left small sparks of hope behind. A whispered warning, a quiet word of courage, a reminder that light, once kindled, can outlast the night. But the years wore heavy on him. Even a Maya in mortal guise can grow weary. He would sit beside lonely campfires and close his eyes, hearing the sound of waves in dreams, the sea calling faintly from the west, the voice of the home he could never return to. Still, he endured, for somewhere in that small land beyond the Brandywine, a destiny waited, one that no power, dark or divine, could foresee. 17 years. 17 long years of shadow and silence. The world had grown colder in that time. The stars seemed dimmer. The wind carried a sharper edge. In the east, clouds gathered, black as the thought of war. And then, one rain-lashed night, a rider came again to Bag End. Lightning flared across the sky, and the door burst open. Frodo Baggins, startled from his reading, turned to see a tall, hunched figure in a sodden cloak, his staff clutched tight, his eyes burning with urgency. "Gandalf," he gasped, You're alive!" The wizard said nothing at first. He strode to the hearth, water dripping from his cloak, and in one swift motion drew a small envelope from within his sleeve. He placed it upon the table. "The ring," he said, quickly. Frodo hesitated, bewildered. "The ring? What is—" "On the table, Frodo, now." The tone left no room for argument. Trembling, Frodo drew forth the golden ring and laid it before him. Gandalf stared at it, a small, perfect circle gleaming in the firelight. So innocent, so harmless. Yet in its gleam he saw the fires of Orodruin, the eye that watched unblinking from the east. "Throw it into the fire," he said. Frodo blinked. "What?" "Throw it in." The hobbit obeyed, tossing the ring into the heart of the flames. The minutes passed in silence, broken only by the hiss of burning wood. Then Gandalf took the tongs, drew the ring forth, and laid it upon the hearthstone. "Look closely," he whispered. And there, as the glow faded, letters appeared, lines of fire that burned with cruel beauty. Ash Nazg Durbatuluk, Ash Naz Gimbatul. Frodo stepped back, pale as ash. "I cannot read them," he whispered. "No," said Gandalf, his voice grave, "but I can. It is the language of Mordor." The room grew cold. Even the fire seemed to dim. "It is as I feared," he said at last, his eyes heavy with sorrow. "The One Ring has returned." Outside, thunder rolled across the hills. The storm that had been gathering for 17 years had broken at last. When the dawn came, it was gray and silent. The rain had ceased, but the air carried the scent of something ending and something beginning. Gandalf stood at the window of Bag End, watching the mists drift over the Shire. In his heart, he felt the weight of the years behind him. The long silence, the sleepless nights, the roads without end. And yet, for the first time in an age, there was a strange and fragile peace within him. He had found the truth. The world would soon awaken to its peril, but it would awaken. In his mind's eye, he saw all that would come, the black riders that would ride from the east, the fellowship yet to be formed, the fire and the ruin and the hope that would rise beyond it. But all that lay still ahead, upon roads untraveled. He looked at Frodo, who sat quietly beside the hearth, his eyes full of fear and courage both. And in that small hobbit face, Gandalf saw the echo of all he had fought for, the reason he had wandered so long, borne so much, and asked so little in return. While the world slept, he had carried its fate in secret. While others sought glory or power, he had chosen patience. While darkness gathered, he had lit small lights in quiet places. He thought of Saruman's cold smile, of the council that would not listen, of Gollum's pitiful cries in the dark. He thought of the white city, gleaming under sun and shadow alike. He thought of Galadriel's voice in his memory. Even the smallest star shines in the deepest night. And with that, the Grey Pilgrim set his staff against the hearth, his cloak drying by the fire, and for a moment, just a moment, he allowed himself to rest. Thus ended the 17 missing years, a silence in the histories of Middle-earth, yet a time upon which all ages turned. When next he walked the roads of the world, it would be beside the bearer of the ring, upon a journey that would decide the fate of all living things. But those years of wandering, of doubt and endurance, were not forgotten. They were the forge of his wisdom, the shadow through which his light would shine. For Gandalf the Grey was more than a wizard. He was the quiet guardian of hope, the unseen hand that steadied the trembling, the voice that spoke courage into fear, the wanderer whose footsteps bridged despair and dawn. And though the world may forget his years of solitude, the stars remember. For even in silence, his watch never ceased. If you've journeyed through the 17 lost years with us, remember to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts. Which moment of Gandalf's hidden road spoke most to you? And when you're ready for another tale from the hidden corners of Middle-earth, journey north and seek Aragorn's lost years. The fire of the Grey Pilgrim still burns there, in the hearts of those who walk unseen and keep the darkness at bay.